are essential for our continued survival. But these have been expressed in the conceptual vocabulary of their time, so that to be useful, their meaning has to be rediscovered and reinterpreted every generation. The sacred books of Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, and the Veda are the best repositories of the ideas that mattered most to our ancestors, and to ignore them is an act of childish conceit. But it is equally naive to believe that whatever was written down in the past contains an absolute truth that lasts forever. The second plank on which this book is built is that currently science provides the most vital information to humankind. Scientific truth is also expressed in terms of the worldview of the times, and therefore will change and might be discarded in the future. There is probably as much superstition and misunderstanding embedded in modern science as there was in the old myths, but we are too close in time to tell the difference. Perhaps, eventually, ESP and spiritual energy will lead us to immediate truth without the need for theories and laboratories. But shortcuts are dangerous. We cannot delude ourselves that our knowledge is further along than it actually is. For better or for worse, at this time, science is still the most trustworthy mirror of reality, and we ignore it only at our peril. The third assumption is that if we wish to understand what real living entails, we should listen to the voices of the past and integrate their messages with the knowledge that science is slowly accumulating. Ideological gestures, such as Rousseau's project of returning to nature, which was a precursor to the Freudian faith, are just empty posturing when one has no idea what human nature is. There was no hope in the past, there is no solution to be found in the present, nor will we be better off by jumping ahead into an imaginary future. The only path to finding out what life is about is a patient, slow attempt to make sense of the realities of the past and the possibilities of the future as they can be understood in the present. Accordingly, in this book, life will mean what we experience from morning to night, 7 days a week, for about 70 years, if we're lucky, for even longer, if we are very fortunate. This might seem a narrow perspective when compared to the much more exalted views of life that myths and religions have made us familiar with. But to turn Pascal's wager on its head, it seems that, when in doubt, the best strategy is to assume that these 70 or so years are our only chance to experience the cosmos, and we should make the fullest use of them. For if we don't, we might lose everything, whereas if we are wrong, and there is life beyond the grave, we lose nothing. What this life will amount to is in part determined by the chemical processes in our body, by the biological interaction among organs, by the tiny electrical currents jumping between the synapses of the brain, and by the organization of information that the culture imposes on our mind. But the actual quality of life, and what we do and how we feel about it, will be determined by our thoughts and emotions, by the interpretations we give to chemical, biological, and social processes. Studying the streams of consciousness passing through the mind is the province of phenomenological philosophy. My work in the past 30 years has consisted in developing a systematic phenomenology that makes use of the tools of the social sciences, primarily psychology and sociology, in order to answer the question, what is life like? And the more practical question, how can each person create an excellent life? The first step in answering such questions involves getting a good grasp of the forces that shape what we can experience. Whether we like it or not, each of us is constrained by limits on what we can do and feel. To ignore these limits leads to denial and eventually to failure. To achieve excellence, we must first understand the reality of the everyday, with all its demands and potential frustrations. In many of the ancient myths, a person who wanted to find happiness, love, or eternal life had to first travel through the netherworld. Before being allowed to contemplate the splendors of heaven, Dante had to wander through the horrors of hell so he could understand what kept us from entering the pearly gates. The same is true of the more secular